So there's this new narrative that is trending in the crypto market called the privacy narrative. This emphasizes on the importance of privacy among users and institutional adopters. But why is this narrative trending? And how can I capitalize on this trend? If you have those questions, well, let's talk about it. So as you can see here, currently there's a new narrative that is trending called privacy blockchain. It is currently the top trending category among platforms such as CoinGecko. As you can see here, there's a new category called the privacy blockchain, where in this category, a lot of coins and tokens are pumping hard. As you can see here, in the last 7 days, a couple of coins have went up significantly, reaching more than 100% in the 7 days. So the narrative started because of a lot of analysts on Twitter calling it out as being bullish. Most of these analysts called out the narrative as being bullish due to institutional adoption and institutional investors taking part and being more interested in it. So previously, the trending narrative was scalability, as most blockchain competes to be the fastest to process transactions. But currently, the narrative has shifted due to institutional investors and companies being more interested in Web3 technology. But the problem is that the Web3 technology currently emphasizes on transparency while keeping anonymity. So, this cannot be comprehended by Web2 companies. If we take a look at an example, for example banks, if we know how banks work, usually if we use a bank, when sending money to someone, we usually trust our money and data into a bank before they send it to the person we want to send it to. So for example like this, Sarah wants to send something to Robert. So Sarah has to send her money and data to the bank, so the bank has to process her transaction and data and then send it to Robert, while processing Robert's data and transaction. Using this mechanism, Sarah and Robert trust the bank fully, and also the banks will not publish the data from Sarah and Robert. That's why everything is not transparent and everything is kept private, because the bank itself has an obligation to their users to keep their data. However, this is not the case for Web3 technology, because if we take a look at Web3 technology from blockchain scanners or blockchain explorers, we can see all the data of a blockchain, including the data on a single block and the data on a single smart contract processing transaction on a block. If we take a look at a smart contract that is currently recording data from a blockchain, we can see that anonymity is kept private. This is done by using hash code, censoring the transaction code and the users transacting. However, the time of the transaction is kept transparent and public, and also the nominal or the amount of transaction is kept public. This is the problem that banks and traditional companies run into, because they don't want their users' data to be kept public or transparent, as they want to keep privacy. However, currently they are interested in adopting Web3 technology, which is why a lot of Web3 providers or Web3 infrastructure providers are giving the access for banks and traditional companies to adopt Web3 while keeping privacy. This is why currently there are a lot of companies that are pumping under the privacy narrative. And also, there are currently 3 categories in the privacy narrative itself. The first one is the category of companies or projects that provides privacy for payment transaction or payment solutions. A popular example is Zcash, which has currently gone up more than 100% in the last 7 days. So Zcash essentially encrypts transactions data for users. This is done to keep privacy intact for users while keeping the benefit of Web3 technology, especially scalability purposes. Another example is Monero, which is one of the older blockchains that focuses on transaction for users. Monero focuses on keeping privacy among transactions among peers. So essentially, it is focused on retail adoption. This is important to highlight, as the privacy narrative is not only focused on institutions but also retails. Through platforms like Zcash and Monero, retail users can keep their data private while transacting in the Web3 ecosystem. Moving on to the second category is keeping privacy while keeping compliance among regulators for institutional adoption. One of the examples is ZK Sync, which promotes incorruptible financial infrastructure for institutions. They essentially provide infrastructure to launch a public blockchain or a private chain similar to an application chain. However, it is not focused as an application chain, as an application chain can only do one features or one transaction type. For example, an application chain can only handle one transaction type, such as sending money from peer to peer, or only for staking, not combining both. However, when launching a private chain or a public chain that is dedicated to a company, they can not only use it for sending money or only one purpose, but can combine multiple purposes in one chain. Also, it provides an infrastructure while keeping compliance to regulators, which is why it is important for institutional adopters. This is why the narrative is trending, because traditional finance companies, such as banks or asset managers, prefers the benefit of Web3 technology but the privacy of Web2 technology and keeping compliance from the Web2 technology. So platform in this category, such as ZK Sync, provides this, which is why ZK Sync has pumped more than 100% in the last 7 days. Another example is Mina Protocol, which provides the similar infrastructure to ZK Sync. It focuses on privacy for institutions and users. So the adoption is not only focused on institutions, but also users who want to build their own chain. The last example is Memento, which is a blockchain out of Asia, specifically Singapore. Memento has proven that Web3 technology can be combined with Web2 technology. This is because of their project, which is a partnership with Deutsche Bank. So essentially, Deutsche Bank adopted Memento for their hub of operation. Deutsche Bank's investment arm, Deutsche Bank AG, has adopted Memento for tokenization and real-world asset purposes. So essentially, all the tokenization of traditional assets is happening on Memento. This is beneficial for Deutsche Bank because they will get more revenue. To put it simply, if Deutsche Bank only sells their assets to Singaporean citizens, they will get less revenue compared to when they are selling to the whole world through on-chain mechanism. By adopting Web3 technology, they have more market to sell to and more users to onboard. This means more revenue for them because this means more transaction on-chain. This is why it's not only beneficial for Memento itself and Deutsche Bank itself, but also for the overall blockchain infrastructure as more liquidity comes on board. The last category is the most private category, which is the category that provides privacy fully for applications to integrate to. So applications, specifically decentralized applications, can integrate with these platforms in this category to provide privacy for their users, specifically retail users. One of the examples is Tornado Cash, which in the past has had some trouble with regulations. Tornado Cash essentially uses a mechanism called mixers, which essentially scatters your money into different wallets, so it is harder to track. This mechanism is done to keep privacy for their users. So essentially, most of their users are retail users who wants to keep privacy and wants to keep their anonymity. Another example is Railgun, which utilizes ZK technology to keep privacy. They are doing a similar thing to Tornado Cash, which is keeping privacy. However, they still comply with regulations and not as degen as Tornado Cash. However, this category focuses on keeping privacy to the fullest while integrating to the centralized application. So essentially, users don't need to move platforms to keep their privacies if the decentralized application that they are using is not prioritizing security and privacy. So this is a quick take on what the privacy narrative is. However, this is not an investment advice to participate, trade, or invest on these projects. You need to do more research to understand the narrative fully, so we suggest you do more research by yourself. We hope this video helps you to understand the privacy narrative. And if you guys like contents like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you guys are notified when we next upload. Cheers, guys!